Thank you for joining whoever is here with us today. Actually, it's a great pleasure standing between esteemed climate investors and entrepreneurs and even government officials to discuss how we will collectively tackle the largest issue of our generation through innovation and passion. I don't know if any of you was here during the curiosity session before. Was really interesting. Catch up if you missed it. A study released by Nature Journal just this month pegs the social cost of carbon at $185 per ton of CO2, more than 3 times the current US federal government figure of $51. These estimates substantially increase the estimated benefits of greenhouse gas mitigation, thereby increase the expected net benefits of more stringent climate policies. Government climate policies will usually include mandating regulations and supporting incentives, as we've recently seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, but less direct risky investments, because of course that's where we, the private sector, kicks in, building industries and promoting commercial opportunities and innovations. Thank you. According to the International Energy Agency, 60% of the technologies that are needed in net zero pathway are not yet commercially available. However, many of such required technological solutions will only evolve to commercialization once regulations will push them to create a solid business case, and vice versa. Regulations and incentives are many times put in place only once relevant tools are available. So that's a loop we'll spend a few minutes discussing in this panel, and how these two hands should work together towards financing decarbonization. From a private sector perspective, be it VCs, CVCs, private equities, financing, financial institutions, and so forth, financing decarbonization requires certain minimum requirements. First, what I call a line of sight towards a valid business case, a sustainable market need, so that numbers add up. Second, but maybe the most important, is our ability to take risks. Each has its own tastes and appetite, from early stage technological risks to entrepreneurial risks to growth and market acceptance risks. Without our appetite to embrace these risks, to challenge conventions, to push our own borders, no decarbonization pledges will be met. Luckily, some started off earlier than others and have led the industry among us as well, all of us here today. We at Capital Nature have been investing in early stage climate startups for over a decade now, showcasing the world some very promising solutions being successfully deployed nowadays. On top of it being a success story, there are a few critical lessons learned. One, the mentioned line of sight is sometimes blurry and requires a lot of imagination, so be bold. Two, put your helmets on because it's a roller coaster that requires patient capital. There was another VC guy here sitting earlier today. He said they raised a new VC with a 15-year term. So that's what we mean by patient capital. Three, leverage your cards. In our case, it's Israel's location between the EU and the GCC, between supply and demand, allowing us to enjoy both worlds. And so working with neighboring countries is a key success factor. And for government support is an essential tool because we're all in this together. Transitioning the global economy to net zero emissions is an enormous task, which requires the joint forces of all parties and calls for alliances to be formed: corporates, financial institutions, governments, investors. So let's start off by setting an example, and that's the structure of this panel today. Mira, Johann, and Galit. We have a very interesting mixture here today because we have a couple of ladies, a couple of men, a couple of locals, and a couple of international players, a couple of VCs, one CVC, one governmental. So that's what we mean by setting an example. I'll take a seat now. So I do have many questions for you. Starting off with you, Mira, because you're the furthest from me, if that's okay. ArcTern Ventures has been investing in climate technology for many years, I think over a decade by now. And you personally have been dealing with climate change and addressing climate challenges for, I think, over 2 decades now. Please share with us how is it different today than it was in the past 10 or 20 years ago, even 5 years ago, and how the time makes it maybe easier or harder?
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, good. Thank you all for being here. I know we're kind of keeping you from lunch out there. So what's different today? I think everybody knows the clean tech boom and bust of the late 2010s sent a lot of entrepreneurs and investors kind of running for the safe pastures of enterprise SaaS. And so we always get asked, okay, why is today different? I think there's a lot different today. The first is really the investing climate. So just over the past 18 months, there have been 78 climate funds launched. Those climate funds span the breadth of early stage to growth stage. And just in the first half of this year, about $19 billion was invested across 500 clean tech startups. And so that far outpaces anything that we saw in the late 2010s. So the dry powder is there for climate from an investment standpoint, but also the types of funds that are around the table now are very diverse. They're very different. We had in the late 2010s kind of a handful, and our fund was there as well. We never stopped investing in climate, but a handful of sort of climate focused. Then you had corporate venture capital and some generalists that were dabbling. Now we have generalists, we have specialist funds like real estate funds that now are investing in a big way, in a meaningful way in climate. We have late stage and growth investors, pension plans. So the amount of capital around the table and the types of investors is far outpaces what we ever saw in the past. I think the second thing that I am most excited about that's different today is the demand. I remember working in the electric vehicle industry in the late 2010s, and I was working with corporations to educate them and develop a business case around electrification and try to create some demand for electric vehicles. Today we're in a position where there's more demand for electrification than there is supply. There are about 50 companies that have set targets to have net zero emissions from their fleets over the next few years. They can't find enough electric trucks and electric vehicles to fulfill that. We have hundreds of companies that have set net zero targets by 2030 to decarbonize their operations. That is creating huge demand in the carbon offset market that we never saw before, and huge demand for clean tech more generally. And then on the consumer side, I think there's much more awareness today than there ever was. I live in San Francisco Bay Area. I woke up one day in 2020 and it looked like we were living on Mars. We had an orange pink sky. I don't know if you saw pictures of this during the wildfire season in 2020, but the sky in the San Francisco Bay Area was orange and it was very scary. And a lot of investors I know actually realized in that moment that climate change was something that would impact them. And they actually moved into climate. And I think around the world, we're experiencing climate change and people are more aware. So the demand side is different. There is demand in a way there wasn't before. One thing I notice as an investor that's very different today is the talent that is founding these companies. The companies that got funded in the late 2010s, that scaled, that exited, companies like Tesla, Sunrun, you have SolarEdge, they have formed these alumni networks of people that worked in those companies from the ground up and now are starting their own companies. They're leapfrogging a lot of the learnings that we had to go through. So the talent we see is incredible. And then finally, we have government incentives. So in the EU, we have the Green New Deal. In the US, we have the Inflation Reduction Act. We never thought we would experience this, but it's been passed. That's $350 billion of incentives. So what that does is that brings down the cost of these technologies. It actually makes it cheaper for people to adopt, just at a time when the demand is at is really on the way up. So we're right now in this moment of a very unique confluence of tailwinds that we never had before. Government, customer demand, there's funding around the table, and we have the right people starting these companies. And thankfully, we're in this position because we have very, very short time to solve the problem.
Thank you, Mira. Fascinating and of course true. And just to tap on this, maybe to add one more remark, I think that the climate needs are all around us in terms of all industries being impacted. There's not a single industry that would not need to deal with issues related to climate. And therefore, even the most, I'd say, low-tech industries, hard to abate. Anything around us should change. So that's why, you're totally right. Johann, ENGIE New Ventures, right? With more than $200 million euros spent to date, ENGIE New Ventures is a very active CVC in the European new energy space. Would be great to hear your view on the subject, to understand your venture's main purpose and how it supports decarbonization, and what is your investment strategies? Examples are good.
Thanks, Ofir, for the question. So first, let me introduce a bit what is ENGIE. I won't bore you with all activities, but basically we are an energy utility leader worldwide. We produce energy, we distribute energy, we supply energy, and we provide the services that are around this energy. We have our purpose has been set to accelerate the transition towards a carbon neutral economy. And we have actually put that in our bylaws in order to make sure we comply with it first. Second, we have pledged to be carbon neutral by 2045. So some are 2030, others 2050. So we've chosen 2045 because we believe it's possible, it's realistic. And we pledge that on the three scope. For those who are not familiar with these three scopes, there is one about supply, second one about your own activities, and the third one is about the activities of your customers. So basically, we can do some things about our supply, but mainly about our activities, so generating electricity, power, natural gas, heat and coal, these kind of things, and also the one of our customers through energy services. Basically, what it means for our activities, first is about renewable energy. So we have deployed already quite a lot of renewable energy, solar, wind, hydro, also other kind of energies, biomass, these kind of things. And the objective is to accelerate that transition. Today, we've installed about 34 gigawatts of renewable energy worldwide. Just for the sake of scale, 1 gigawatt is kind of one nuclear plant. So basically, we have kind of the equivalent of 34 like that. The objective in less than a decade is to go to 80 gigawatt worldwide. This is by far the main acceleration. Second point is about energy solutions to our customers. And here as well, we have large targets in order to provide our customers the industries that have hard to abate carbon emissions with means in order to become carbon neutral. Energy is of course a cause of climate change, but it can also be a solution. We are convinced about that as long as we are able to provide with these means. So here the objective is to install a number, and I won't give you a lot of figures, but a number of gigawatts of new clean energy to these customers. We also have a plan about hydrogen, green hydrogen, of course, because it is a form of energy. Also about district heating and cooling, etc., etc. I'm not going to enumerate everything as oppositely to what I said at the beginning. So this is our purpose. These are our activities and actually plans. Now we all know that these technologies do not exist yet. Most of these do not exist yet. 60% do not exist, and so basically this needs to be invented. This will not be. We know that this will not be one technology, one unique technology. each technology is going to play a role. Some are already early stage, but there's a lot of research, development, deployment, and innovations that need to be implemented. So that's an overall ecosystem, and this is where ENGIE ventures enter into on the scene. What we do, and so we are a corporate venture capital fund, so we belong to the corporate, to ENGIE. What we do is investing in startups at early stage that can comply with this purpose within this strategy, trying to scale up their businesses. The point is not about money. There's a lot of money on the market, a bit less now with the crisis, but there has been a lot of money on the market. The point is to be able to create strategic partnership with the startups, the innovations that can actually be integrated into our offering, into these new systems, new low carbon systems that need to be implemented, deployed on the market in order to create an effect, to create an impact. So basically that's again about optimizing renewable energy. That's about energy efficiency. That's about hydrogen, green gases, biomethane, this kind of things. We don't have a strict framework that is closed because we know that we know what we know, but we know that we don't know everything either. So basically, we can't be closed on this. Just maybe a few examples so that it is more concrete for you of our latest investment. We've invested in a startup named Ineratech in Germany. But still trying to sell worldwide. What they do is producing what is called synthetic gas and e-fuels. Maybe you're more familiar with e-fuels for aviation, for example, in order to replace kerosene. And basically, in order to do so, they have a system that is using hydrogen, green hydrogen, together with fatal CO2 emissions that can come from steel industry, for example. They combine these two in order to produce kerosene or synthetic gas. This is exactly in our core businesses because basically we are able to provide on the value chain, first the green hydrogen, second our customers with solutions that can impact their carbon footprint. That's one example. There are others about an American company named C0, that's about methane pyrolysis. It produces hydrogen without the CO2 emissions. Last one I would quote here is Redaptive, which is about energy efficiency, so helping customers not to invest in reducing their energy footprint, but invest for them so that they can reduce it with no cost, at no cost, just with the benefit. And the last one I'd like to quote because they are here today is Home Biogas, which is an Israeli company doing some generating biogas from residential and actually commercial waste, organic waste. And this biogas is used as energy. So, and actually, I could quote many. We have invested. You spoke about 200 million euros deployed. We've invested in about 50 startups worldwide, and we currently have about 25 in portfolio. So I could quote each of these, but this would become boring. My point here is to say there are solutions to couple the smart capital, climate capital, together with smart deployment of these technologies, and this can create an impact. Sorry, I was a bit long.
Thank you, Johann. I think that the companies you mentioned are very good examples of how markets are being built, how opportunities are opening up that they were not here before. Like the waste, of course, the home biogas and the other examples you gave. And I think in a more wider perspective, that ENGIE is a good example of how an energy player is transitioning and adapting itself to a cleaner future. That's great. Thank you. Galit, moving on to you. You've also been 20 years, over 20 years in the Ministry of Environmental Protection. I think the ministry is like 25 years old or something, right?
More.
More, okay. But you've been there from the early start. Yeah, okay. Including a lead role in the OECD's Committee for Environmental Policy. Would be great to hear from you how the government's role has developed along the years And more specifically, can you share with us the set of tools that the government and your office specifically has developed and is nowadays developing and deploying to accelerate the capital flow of the public and private sectors into decarbonization?
Yeah, thank you. I must take a minute or a few seconds just to say that I feel here like a celebration. This is a celebration for us because if thinking about a few years ago, it was just a dream to see all around, all the very young people here, all around startups, investors, and so on. So let me start with this. Excuse me for taking this time. Well, as a government, we see our role for bringing to the table, or let's say to the market, two main areas. First of all is the regulation and standardization, and the second one is information. For the first part, let's say the regulation and the standardization, what we are now initiating is the Israeli green taxonomy. Following the EU taxonomy, for the green taxonomy, that just published the last year. And we try to define for you, for investors, for banks, for all the market, what is green? What is green economy? What is green economic activities? And this is the right signal for the market. We would like you to know, do you take risks? Or you want to, if you want to manage your risk or you would like to reduce your risk, go to these economical activities that in the green taxation, taxonomy. So this is the first one. And of course, we will like to also create more information, accessible information for you. And we are now creating the risks maps that will help everybody to manage the risks. And that will be the platform to support all the decision-making process by the government, local authorities, and of course banks and investors to look about these risks, the physical risks that is not going to be included in the green taxonomy, those physical risks that we cannot ignore anymore. We see it all over, floods and fires and all around, and the heat waves and so on. Sea level rise, we are here in Tel Aviv. Those physical risks will be in our platform. Actually, we just saw here tomorrow is one of the companies that published here, and we are working together with them to create those maps, and those maps will let everybody manage all these physical risks. And it's not just information about the risk, it's where is the risk, it's also about the vulnerability of the population in those areas, inside cities and outside cities. So this would like to, you have more information about the climate risks. And final one, I would like to add this, the index, the company index that we published a decade ago about the risks, potential risks from the environmental performance of the companies that we every year publish. This is also information for investors and banks to look at those companies. Would you like to invest in those companies that in the high risks potential for the environment and also for the climate, or would you like to reduce your investors in those companies? So those are just a bit of our information and standardization that we are providing for the market to create this market. And of course, one of the most important one to give the right signal and the certainty for the market is the climate law, the Climate Act that we just worked for it all this year, and we just pass it only in the parliament, only the first run, and still we have to complete it. I hope in the next government, the next parliament.
Too many elections, right? Too many elections.
Yeah, yeah, but I think this is the certainty for the market to know. I think this is the way, this is the path of the Israeli economy, and this is the path of the whole world economy, and this is our way, and ask you all to enjoy this path. Thank you.
Thanks, Galit. So incentive through information. That's the point here. That's a fascinating one. So it makes our life as the ones bringing the money in easier and more clear, and that's a real positive point, I think. Mira, let's jump into a couple of examples from your portfolio, because I did take a look before this panel. You have 26 companies, I think. Some of them are really fascinating. And maybe you can share a couple of examples of the way of their funding journey and how they were able to collaborate or consortium with others, or you as a financer did that. Just to give a couple of examples of how decarbonization financing actually happens.
Yeah, I think the good news is that for the startups in the room today, there's just so many different kinds of investors that you can bring around the table. So you can actually think very strategically about the consortiums you want to build and who will bring you the most value at what stage in your growth. So I'll give a couple of examples. We have a very wide portfolio, so we invest in, we're climate generalists, so we invest across all of the categories of climate as long as there's a measurable carbon impact. And we invest in software, we invest in hardware and software, and we invest in some more capital intense technologies as well. So our first unicorn is a company called Palmetto, and they're a pure software platform, and they connect buyers or gig economy workers who are selling residential solar to people who want to put solar on their roofs with local installers. Most of the market in the US is in local installers. The national brands have sort of a minority of the market. And they started off with financial VCs, climate-focused VCs, energy strategics. And that was really important for the kind of the strategic input that they needed to scale. And as they started to grow, they attracted social capital, which wrote a very, very large check and could have propelled them on their next kind of stage for growth. And that was the right investor at that time to come in and invest in the growth stage. And then now they're kind of heading towards IPO. We have two companies that are in the built environment, and both of them, interestingly, had a consortium of both prop tech funds and climate funds. And so the prop tech funds bringing the real estate LPs on the commercial side, LPs that can actually adopt the technology, and the climate funds legitimizing the technology. And then we have on the deep tech side, carbon capture and utilization, Carbon America. And this is one we brought in one of our LPs, which is the Canadian Pension Plan, who really invests for the long term because they're trying to decarbonize all of their operations and all of their investments. So this is the kind of thing they write very large check, and they'll write another large check. So I think those are just some examples of the different types of consortiums. And I think like I said before, the good news is that you kind of have lots of different players around the table at each inflection point in the growth.
That's great. Thank you. Johann, let's talk key success factors for financing decarbonization. First success factor would be a working microphone, and then the rest is yours.
Thanks. Key success, I think some of this has already been quoted. I believe there are different key success factors. First one is, of course, regulation, market signals. So we need to know where to go. What is the future framework in which investors would invest and companies would develop their business? This is key, but also to flag incentives. including public incentives toward this objective. This consistency is of course key to provide visibility and to mitigate at least some of the risk, and just keep the technology risk, which is difficult to be mitigated before some time. So that's the first thing. Second thing that Mira said, I fully agree, is the question of ecosystem. It's a question of building the right consortium. I believe this is something that used to be the case in businesses decades ago, and little by little has been forgotten. Building a business along a value chain is key. Each company, each sector has its own priorities, its own strengths. The beauty of it, it becomes beautiful when you're able to assemble all of that, each of the players being able to provide its strengths to a common objective. And I believe this crisis, climate change, I speak about, but also energy crisis, as we can see today on the market, is creating this common goal so that each player can come with its own strengths. So smart VC money, smart VC dollars are actually key for that, and there are plenty, or there used to be plenty of, there is a bit less now. That's one thing. But let's not forget about corporate VCs, because they are able to deploy and scale up these technologies on the market to help finding their market opportunities and get scaled up quicker. That's of course key. There are other ways as well. I believe that sovereign funds can also play a role. I've heard some about Israel earlier this morning. There's already many things existing on the market, but each has to play a role when we speak about regulations such as Fit for 55 in Europe, such as the new Inflation Reduction Act in the US, etc., etc. There are plenty signals that go in the same direction and have to play a role against this key issue, which is climate change. Maybe I would quote one or two examples that we've seen recently, which I believe are very good signals about what's happening right now. We've just invested in one company project that is named Gravity. You may have heard about it, which is about producing green steel in Europe. The project will be located in south of France. Basically, steel is a hard-to-abate sector. They consume natural gas, huge quantities of natural gas, and emit huge quantities of CO2. So basically, the objective of the project is to use hydrogen, to produce green hydrogen, and then to use it in order to produce green steel. That is key for the building industry, for the car industry, etc., etc. And the good thing, the nice thing about it is that there is a form of public incentive, public money, but that remains limited. The beauty is that it creates a consortium of investors around this common goal. And so, for example, we do invest with Faurecia, which is now Forvia, OEM, car OEM manufacturer. We also co-invest with Primetals, which is a Mitsubishi Heavy Industry subsidiary, and others, Plug Power for the hydrogen, etc., etc. Basically, they are building a consortium of investors that are meaningful in order to solve the issue. Just in terms of impact, this project is due to solve about 5% of the French CO2 emissions yearly, just one project. So basically, it means that if you do 20 like that, you solve a lot of issues, and then you need to scale this up to replicate these models everywhere. I can quote other projects, other startups like that, but basically, when there's a public intervention that helps providing a signal to the market and to scale it up.
Thank you. I think going back to my opening remarks earlier, what you're saying is that risk-taking and the ability to take risks, whether it's pension funds that Mira mentioned or the sovereign funding that you mentioned, it's part of the game, and each of us needs to take some risks. We're taking the technology risks as early-stage investors and so forth. That's maybe common grounds of all success key factors. Galit, a quick question for you, and if you have time, then you go ahead and ask me a question, because we're running out of time here. Being a relatively small country, only 10 million people, but one that is proud of its technological innovations, is geographically located between East and West, and recently strongly connected to its neighboring countries, as I mentioned earlier. What, from your opinion, is the added value of Israel's climate tech ecosystem in the context of the global challenges and global opportunities? And how do you perceive the role as a government in that perspective?
Yeah. Okay, here I'll again bring two aspects from the government. First of all is the pricing, carbon pricing. As you probably know, we are working for the carbon pricing in Israel, carbon tax, that unfortunately this lack of government we didn't finish it, but we will do so next few months, and we will have a carbon price for in Israel. And I think this is the most important tool for us for optimize the market. If we're speaking about the right signal and where we're want to go. So this is the economic tool, the most effective one that all over the world, find that all over the world, that will probably optimize our market and right signal to the market again. So this is from the regulation side. From the, as you said, subsidies, or you mentioned bringing money to the market and incentives. You said incentives, right? We'll look at government investment that should go wherever there is market failure. And there is a market failure in the environmental and climate technology. We just here with us Avital. I hope that you will find time to speak about it. A few years ago, we just mapped all the failure in the market for the environmental technologies, and we face that there is the death of valley of death, the valley of death. And we all spoke about it before in the environmental technology, that this is the, as we said, the pilot projects, or we'll speak about the first commercialization for those technologies. So we said, okay, if there is a gap there and there is a market failure, so let's put our investments, as we heard in the morning, the Israel Innovation Authority that we are working with, we said, yes, where there is a risk and the market is not there yet, the investors are not there yet, so we will get in, we'll take the risks. But we found it's not just a financial risk, and it's not just a financial failure, there is also a regulation failure. Because we as the government ask for what we said, best available technique or technology, which means we cannot take the risks that this technology will implement and then it's not work. So we said, okay, we'll give a grace period, and we'll take the risk together with you. Then you have also flexibility in the regulatory, and then also you will get incentives to put inside. And we saw that there is 60 million shekels until today that we invest in, and there is, I don't want to say hundreds, but a lot of technologies that implement Israeli technologies in the industry in Israel, and now they can, of course, sell it all over the world, and this is very important. And what we saw today in the graphs here in the morning, that it starts from 2018 until 2021. I think this is the first year that we start to invest in this program. So I think that's why we see all those in the graphs, and would like to see it more and more, and we'll continue with this program. And of course,
we have like 30 seconds.
okay.
So
So that's it.
Okay, great. So just before you jump on the stage, just a couple of closing remarks. One, just to tap on what you were just saying. Some of our very early stage companies or investments that we made a few years back received governmental support from the IEA. And we just recently calculated and found out that for each dollar that the government invested in our companies, they were able to raise more than $20 on each dollar. So it's like more than 20 times the government support. So in that sense, I think that government funding is there. It takes the early stage risk, but it's very effective, and we found it to be very successful. So we should keep on doing that. Second remark, going back to Galit again, to your remark about celebration. This is a great celebration. We're having another one end of October. Everybody's welcome. I think the market is waking up here in Israel and worldwide, and it's great to see how so many faces, so many people, and so much enthusiasm. So thank you very much, Mira, Galit, and Johann. Thank you all for coming.